And before this video begins, I would just like to thank my Asbantium level patron, Foul and Cortez. Thank you for supporting the channel. 1st of March, 2020. 5 years ago, the landscape of Doctor Who changed forever, with the bombshell reveal of The Timeless Child, which revealed the dark origin of the Doctor as a mysterious alien orphan who was taken in by the Time Lords, who then used the Doctor's unique regenerative ability to found their entire advanced society and ultimately unlock the secrets of time travel. The storyline exposed the truth that the Doctor underwent countless mind wipes before ultimately escaping Gallifrey as the heroic wanderer we now know them as. Naturally, when this was revealed, a lot of fans were very upset. Hell, even I made a bit of a knee-jerk rant, which basically propelled my channel into a level of success that ultimately made it become my job. So hey, I guess I can thank it for that. The Timeless Child seemed to be a disastrous retcon, completely changing Doctor Who and ruining the mythology of the titular character. But almost exactly 5 years later, did The Timeless Child actually ruin Doctor Who? Did it even really change the show at all? Or did we all just jump the gun and overreact like the definitely well-adjusted obsessive fans of a science fiction show we all are? Well, let's find out by diving into 5 years of modern Doctor Who's biggest controversy, The Timeless Child.
I don't like it, but I'll have to go along with it.
To start with some context, Doctor Who Series 11 didn't really have much of a storyline, at least not compared to what we were used to in previous series, which had narratives like Bad Wolf, Mr. Saxon, and the crack in Amy's wall. But in Series 11, Episode 2, The Ghost Monument, we were introduced to the mysterious phrase, The Timeless Child, as those forgettable villainous flying curtains tease the Doctor about a dark secret in her past even she doesn't know about. It immediately had fans speculating about the usual things. Was Susan Foreman going to come back? Who is the Timeless Child? Is the Doctor the Rani? But this mysterious name was all we had to theorise about for nearly 2 whole years, until Series 12. In 2020, fittingly just before the global pandemic destabilised our way of life, Series 12 strolled in and slapped us with a quadruple whammy of The Master's Return, the destruction of Gallifrey, a pre-Hartnell Doctor, and the reveal of The Timeless Child, which, as I mentioned, revealed the Doctor to be a much older, more mysterious figure than we previously knew them to be. In the titular finale, when the Master explains his destruction of his home planet and his own species, he details his discovery of this backstory. How the Doctor was found abandoned underneath a portal and experimented upon, leading to the regeneration ability and the founding of Time Lord Society itself. There was also all that stuff with the Cyber Lords and the Death Particle and all that, but that's not exactly relevant right now, is it? The climactic reveal of the Doctor's hidden origins, initially disguised as the life of an Irish orphan named Brendan, was a huge thing to unveil, after 57 years of knowing who the Doctor was. Suddenly, the show was turned upside down, and it's safe to say people weren't very happy about that.
Take it away, Brendan!
The immediate reaction was one of near universal shock and outrage, although a lot of fans were already clued in because the plot point had leaked before the series even began. So the moment the Fugitive Doctor was revealed halfway through, we all knew what was coming at the end of the series. The Timeless Child backstory was quickly decried as ruining the show, telling us too much about the Doctor, and introducing all these other potential Doctors out of nowhere. Hell, people were even speculating that side character Ravio would also be revealed as another incarnation. Thankfully, that wasn't the case. This idea of any character being the Doctor was kind of memed out of being a serious concern, but a lot of fans were genuinely upset that it affected the legacy of William Hartnell as the first Doctor, by suggesting that there were many more before him. Of course, this wasn't actually the first time such a suggestion had been made. Even Classic Who kicked it around a little bit, but it was explicit confirmation that he wasn't the first version of the character anymore, which many saw as trampling over the show's legacy. The other main initial reaction was one of a belief that it was a character assassination, changing the Doctor from a normal Time Lord who ran away to explore and be good to a predestined mythical figure born special. A big appeal of the character was this sense of their choices making them special and important, suggesting that anyone could be like the Doctor. But by making it so that the character was born special, felt like a bit of a spit in the face for a lot of fans. But we'll get to that later, once you hit that like and subscribe. Got you again. After the dust settled from the initial reveal, Series 13 pushed further into the backstory, with Flux centering around the mysterious Division, the secret Gallifreyan agency which used the Doctor as an agent, constantly promising to grant them freedom, only to then wipe their mind and keep them under control. The series gave us flashbacks to the fugitive Doctor as this operator, along with the Doctor having visions of a Lungbarrow-esque house holding all the answers, and a fob watch supposedly storing all those previous memories. It was a very explicit continuation of the Timeless Child storyline. 6 episodes dangling this past in front of both us and the Doctor, with her adoptive mother Tecteun offering her these memories and closure in exchange for her leaving the universe behind to die. Obviously, she didn't because, it's the Doctor, and Tecteun died while the Doctor chose to throw the watch deep inside the TARDIS rather than opening it. A lot of people had been curious about whether Flux would continue the Timeless Child storyline, if at all, but the way it did was almost seen as fence-sitting. Sure, it gave us a bit more information about the Division, but aside from that, nothing really changed or developed. Things were still largely in the same place as they were at the end of Series 12. Even the Doctor's former companion and Division teammate Carvanista couldn't shed any light about their time together because he had a convenient Suicide Squad brain chip that would kill him if he said anything. So by the end of the Chibnall era, the Timeless Child storyline, as controversial as it was, felt a little unfinished, which kind of annoyed everyone, even if they liked the concept to begin with. After the Doctor throws away the watch, the Timeless Child storyline isn't addressed in any of the 3 subsequent specials, outside of a brief hologram appearance by the fugitive Doctor. And with Chibnall and Whittaker's departures in power of the Doctor, it left a lot of fans questioning, what next? After all, it was Chibnall's passion project, a storyline he'd envisioned since he was a kid and designed to be his legacy, like the Time War for Russell T Davies, or, River Song for Moffat. So it was a big piece of lore to deal with, and considering it was unresolved, nobody really knew how it would be tackled going forward. I mean, it had far bigger lore implications than things like the Time War, River Song, Trenzalore, and Clara. It's not something that can easily be forgotten about, especially since a large number of fans were hoping it would be outright retconned and removed by Chibnall's successor, because the storyline was that unpopular. But his successor was Russell T Davies, returning to Doctor Who, and someone who was absolutely in no rush to bring Gallifrey back. After all, he had destroyed it to begin with. Obviously, Davies wasn't going to completely undo the work of a colleague and a friend, but he didn't just completely ignore the Timeless Child, or even the universal destruction of the Flux. There's a good scene in Wild Blue Yonder where the Doctor is confronted by the Not Donna, and she mentions him not really being from Gallifrey, with Church on Ruby Road then doubling down on the storyline, by having the Doctor acknowledge he's an orphan much like Ruby herself, found under mysterious circumstances. The so-called RTD2 era hasn't gone any further with the storyline. It hasn't contributed anything new, but it has still addressed it and used it for context, which is a fair and respectful way of handling it and winding things down without retconning or actively continuing it. And that's the current status of the Timeless Child. That's everything which has happened since its reveal 5 years ago. But with all that controversy and the uproar about it ruining the show and the Doctor, has it actually changed anything? Now we have the full picture and the finished story, we can look back at the reveal with the power of hindsight, and, in my opinion, see it wasn't actually such a big deal after all. When it happened, I was one of the many vocal fans suggesting Doctor Who had been ruined by this storyline. I fully believed it was a character assassination that changed too much about the Doctor and the show itself. But 5 years later, I don't think it did anything of the sort. Now, that's not to say I think it's a good storyline. It's far from that. I still think it's somewhat unnecessary and a weak adaptation of the so-called Cartmel master plan. But it's nowhere near as damaging as it seemed at the time. Let me explain. My main issue was how it stopped the Doctor being special through choice and actions, because of that chosen one framing. After all, they can regenerate infinitely, they were born unique, and created all of Time Lord history as we know it. It's hard to not see the Doctor as an extra special chosen one after all of that. But the storyline, as flawed as it really is, goes to great lengths to acknowledge and outright refute the idea of the Doctor no longer being an ordinary hero we can all relate to, because it's an identity crisis the Doctor herself experiences. She has those same worries about it changing her life and removing her agency, but the fugitive Doctor outright tells her it doesn't really matter.
Have you ever been limited by who you were before?
And that's true. Even without those memories or any of that knowledge, the first Doctor still made that decision to leave Gallifrey. He and every subsequent incarnation still made their own choices and their own conscious decisions to do what they did and become the character we know and love. When you really look at it, the Timeless Child revelation really doesn't change all that much about the character and their journey throughout all these lifetimes. The sense of mystery is the same, if anything they're even more mysterious now, and their self-doubt was symbolically solved by throwing the watch away. Is that a good thing for the story to have done? That's up to you, really. It's not really a great idea to introduce something so massive and then say it doesn't really matter, but even with this backstory, the Doctor isn't actually different on a character level. Like seriously, is there really anything different about the Doctor now? Genuinely. Everything we've seen the character say or do between 1963 and 2025 remains the same with or without the Timeless Child backstory. The whole thing about them being found under a portal is kind of just a footnote. It's flavor text. Like an item description in Dark Souls. It doesn't really matter, it's just there to make it more interesting. And what of the fugitive Doctor? The permanent, lasting change and constant reminder of this storyline. Well, the character still exists, and still has a prominent role in Doctor Who media. Just recently, she had her first Big Finish box set release, to a solid reception, along with previously appearing in the Once and Future Coda release. Along with that, she had the 2022 comic story Origins, all examples of a concentrated push to establish the fugitive Doctor as a legitimate incarnation on the same level as all the others. After all, this is the Doctor. She's no different to the War Doctor, for example, an unnumbered incarnation existing in a bit of a grey area and able to pop up whenever in expanded media with no real strings attached, because they didn't have a traditional era like all the numbered Doctors. Even now, the fugitive Doctor can always reappear in the show itself, and such a reappearance is consistently rumoured to happen, even in the upcoming season 2, as confusing as that would be. Out of everything Timeless Child related, the fugitive Doctor was the most well received due to Jo Martin's confident Doctor-like performance. She's the main legacy of the Timeless Child storyline now, the personification of the narrative as a whole, and distilling it all into one specific character rather than spreading it across a bunch of others. And since the fugitive Doctor was so well received and people are more than happy to accept her as a legitimate incarnation, it helps lessen the so-called damage of the storyline as a whole. It's not like they started throwing in a billion different Doctors in our face and expecting them all to be treated as main incarnations. No, it's just one single incarnation representing this entire narrative. And honestly, that makes it okay. It's more digestible that way, and it prevents the plot point changing too much or replacing the legacies of anyone. Looking back, I think they did a great job of showing us just how many times the Doctor was forced to change without putting too many faces and identities to it. All we really needed was one, and that's all they gave us. So, what is the future of the Timeless Child? We've had over 5 years of this storyline. From its first hint in 2018 to the Fugitive Doctor's latest appearance in 2025, it has become ingrained within the show's DNA by this point. So what next? Well, nothing, really. As mentioned before, the show doesn't need to keep bringing it up. It's just a thing that exists now. It's up to future writers to handle it now, but they're under no obligation to. It could become just one of those strange little pieces of lore, ignored like the half-human line from the TV movie. Or it could be developed even further. After all, The Timeless Child is essentially an adaptation of the Cartmel Master Plan, which itself was somewhat unfinished and open-ended because it was never properly developed due to the cancellation of the show. So down the line, another writer might continue The Timeless Child, or adapt it into their own storyline the same way Chibnall himself did. The Doctor's true origins are still left open-ended. We don't know what was on the other side of that portal, or what the Doctor's true species is. The future might see more Timeless Doctors appearing in the way we were so fearful of when it first happened. After all, they could bring a celebrity in for a one-off appearance. Hopefully they don't, but it's still always going to be a possibility because of the long span of time these incarnations were operating. But I really do sincerely think The Timeless Child is now a finished and shelved storyline. The story has been told. Chibnall did what he wanted to do, for better or for worse, and the show has moved on now. Russell T Davies is telling his own stories about gods and magic and women pointing at signs, and The Timeless Child is now just a footnote in the Doctor's history, and it's probably best that way. 5 years ago, if you mentioned the words Timeless Child, it would cause a huge fight. Basically, a full-on armed conflict amongst fans. Now, when you say those same two words, fans mainly just kind of shrug and go, oh yeah, that was kind of weird, what was that all about? The dust has long settled, and we can now all look back on it with a new, more mature sense of perspective, and admit how little it actually affected the show. And don't get me wrong, that's still not necessarily a good thing. After all, it introduced this huge bombshell piece of lore with huge implications, never actually really committed to it, then said it didn't matter at all. So it makes you wonder what the point was. It's still bad writing, it's still a bad idea, it's just not show destroying. The Doctor being an older, more mysterious figure was something that had been done before, with Lungbarrow and the story of the Doctor being the reincarnation of the Other, one of the founders of Time Lord Society, who was also Leela and Andred's son somehow. People tend to forget that part, it's kind of weird. In all honesty, with the 2020 vision of hindsight, I think we all kind of overreacted with The Timeless Child. It was something big, sudden and scary. We didn't know where it was going in the grand scheme of things. We thought it changed absolutely everything, and the whole show had been ruined. The Doctor wasn't the same anymore, and that evil Chibnall was trying to destroy Doctor Who. But it ultimately didn't change anything, which is why it isn't so controversial anymore, and people don't even really talk about it by this point. Well, except the occasional flashpoints, like the one that happened literally as I'm writing this video. The Doctor threw her fob watch away. She refused to let this backstory define her, a conscious message from the show that we shouldn't either. William Hartnell is still the first Doctor. That incarnation still left Gallifrey and went on all those adventures. All those choices were still natural and real. The Doctor's life before that point is essentially a completely different character, so we can just decouple it in a way and continue on normally. A lot has happened in the past 5 years. We've had the returns of Sutekh and the Toymaker. We've had Bi-Generation, which is the next lore controversy. We had the returns of Ace, Mel and Tegan, along with our Lord and Saviour, the 8th Doctor, #McGangang. But the fabric of Doctor Who is still very much the same, even after all these years. And that's quite reassuring, honestly. I still don't necessarily like the Timeless Child revelation, but now we know how it ends, the beginning isn't so bad anymore. At least not in terms of the story itself. The actual execution of the Master's PowerPoint presentation is still unforgivably bad. Whether that's 5, 10 or 15 years later, there is still a lot of potential with the Timeless Child. It could be changed and workshopped into something completely different, or it could be left untouched. But it's here to stay. And I'm glad, at least for the most part, that the chapter is closed, and I personally have made peace with something I previously thought had ruined my favourite show. Because it hasn't. Things keep ticking along, just like the ups and downs of life itself. And, as always, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye. And I'd just like to give a special thank you to my Asbantium level patron, Fowlon Cortez, my Platinum level patron, Matthew Burns, and all my Gold level patrons, Ben Salmon, Chris Douglas, Daniel Shillito, and Seb Falco. Thank you so much for your support.